So are these local Gila monsters,
Yeah.
or
These are. One of them was unconscious, swimming or floating in a pool with a bird eating its tail.
You are listening to Urban Wildlife Podcast.
welcome back to another episode of the Urban Wildlife Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Billy Brown,
I'm Tony Crosdale.
and today we have
Michelle Niedermeyer.
Michelle. What do you do when you're not podcasting with us?
I help people solve pest problems in the least toxic, most effective way.
Okay, neat. And so we'll hear more about that in a little bit. But first, we'll do some of the stuff we always do in the introductions, which is if you like this podcast, please share it. You can do that online. You can just tell people about it. But somehow let people know if you like the podcast so that they can discover it and like it too. And if you want to send us an email, you can email us at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at urbwildlifecast. You can find us on Facebook. And if whatever your platform is, iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, please rate us and leave us some comments. We'd love to see what you got to say.
Cool. Absolutely.
All right. So the theme for today is pests and sort of what counts as a pest and why are some things pests and some things not pests. And we've got 3 pieces. One is basically me just recording when I was trying to kill some mice in our kitchen for that'll be short. And then one is I got to turn the fan. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, just so people know, we're in the middle of an unbelievable heat wave in Philly, so you're going to hear a fan in the background.
Otherwise, you just wouldn't be able to do this. Tell us, start, I guess, basic explanation. What's
What
your
is it that
office
I do?
Yeah.
All right, so I work for the Pennsylvania Integrated Pest Management Program, which is a program that's housed at Penn State University but not funded by Penn State. And we're in Philadelphia, housed in the Philadelphia County Extension Office. And our program is charged with pest issues across the state. We deal with pests in all situations from agriculture to urban. So,
How about urban agriculture?
and urban agriculture, yes. You can connect them any which way you want. But I
Okay.
deal mostly with pests in urban areas, or urban agricultural areas. And so anything that's bugging you, we might have an answer and a solution for.
Bugging us. Yeah, that's very cute. So what are the pests that you get that you end up consulting about most often?
So frequently we deal with cockroaches, mice, ants.
Got it.
All right, here's the big one. Bed bugs.
Had it.
And then there's a lot of urban wildlife that folks, deal with in the city that, might not be obvious. Things like raccoons and possums. There's a lot of things out there that can be a pest depending on if it's in your space or not.
So speaking of things that are in our space, we were just, Gigi and I fight a seasonal battle against small ants that, we're pretty sure they just invade from the backyard. And so I think, I was going to say we've sort of come to accept them on a certain level, but I'm looking at Gigi. She's nodding. Okay, she might accept them a little less than I do. We still squish them. It encourages us to keep things a little cleaner.
Sure.
Which can be hard with a 4-year-old. But yeah, you were looking at, what'd you call it, a grease ant?
So
or a
it could
pavement
have been a grease ant or a pavement ant. Some people refer to them as sugar ants. They're just the little tiny ants that are a nuisance. They're not really, they're a pest because they're a nuisance, but they're not a pest because of, health concerns.
That's a distinction.
Or a structural concern.
So talk about that a little bit more.
Okay, so, for example, if it were a carpenter ant, it would be a structural concern. Because carpenter ants invade wood that's already decaying and then help bring things back to the earth. Okay, so carpenter ants are...
It's a lovely function outside of your house.
Well,
Circle of life.
It is. In the big picture, they're doing a service, right? They're helping things return to soil, and they would never attack wood that is not already decaying. So then, pests can be structural pests. Pests can also be something of a health concern. So something that spreads disease one way or another. Bacteria, viruses, can bite or sting, cause allergic reactions. So, the ants we have in this area are not of human health concern. They're a nuisance or they're structural. But the sugar ant, the pavement ant, the grease ant are clearly just nuisance ants. And I don't mean to say that a nuisance isn't a thing. It is, but it's not the end of the world. And so,
Could they actually add nutritional value to your food?
Well, I mean, most insects are a good source of protein. So there is that added benefit, I suppose.
Thankfully, we don't have those ants in quite enough quantity for them to be a good source of protein. I know.
Yeah, Judy's noting that these are there aren't that many of them, and they're pretty small. It would take a lot of these ants to.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing, you noted that we just had this gigantic downpour, and we had another one last night in the middle of the night from, 3:30 to 7:30 this morning. Yeah. And so oftentimes these are ants that nest outside. Generally speaking, these types of ants aren't nesting inside. But when they're nesting outside, they could be in an area that might get flooded. And so I personally have had ants moving their nest through my house to higher ground. And I knew they were doing so because they were carrying the eggs. And so
I thought you knew so because you could hear higher ground being played in the background.
Yeah.
And which version was it?
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder. Better be Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
So
if it was a flea, then it was Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Oh.
So, there could be a lot of reasons that ants come into the house. In the springtime, you said that you have a seasonal impact. So in the springtime, a lot of times people have ants in their kitchen, mostly because the ant colony, because ants are a colony insect, right? So they live communally. There's a queen. She's in charge of all of them. All of them are her daughters. They're all sisters. They work together for the greater good of the queen and the colony. And so the queen sends out these scavenger ants and these worker ants to find food. So oftentimes in the springtime when the nest is just kind of waking back up from, kind of what's like a hibernation in the winter, you're going to see them in the spring because they're out looking. Food, water, and shelter is what everybody wants. Ants are no different.
They're scouting.
Yes. And so you see them then. You also see them in the fall when they're hurrying up, trying to save enough food to make it through the winter. So spring and fall are good times for ants, or when there is a giant rainstorm and they're looking for higher ground.
I hope. Okay, we'll keep an eye out for the arc of ants.
But again, they're really not a big deal. And
yeah. So what is? I guess when in terms of like sort of dinner party stories or cocktail party stories, like what are some standout calls you've gotten for critters and that people thought of as pests?
No. Well,
like I was reading recently a situation in like North Market, not too far from here, where they tore down a house where there were supposed to be like some turkey vultures dwelling in the house,
right. Mm-hmm.
and people were absurdly concerned that they would take their dogs. But that struck me as okay. Now we have turkey vultures being perceived as a neighborhood pest,
right?
And so.
Yeah, so like that story about turkey vultures, turkey vultures, again, like other animals, they're there to clean up the mess that some others have left behind. And so when we talk about integrated pest management, the first step is to identify the pests. The second step is to figure out why they're there. And if you can eliminate the reason they're there, then the pest will go away. So those turkey vultures were there because there was something to feed on, or there was shelter. Right? Yeah. Food, shelter, water. My guess is there was probably food and shelter. I don't know all the specifics to that story.
Yeah, I found some like articles, just very little in depth on that.
Yeah.
I went by, I checked out where they tore the house down, just a vacant lot of dirt right now. But
yeah, so I guess eliminating that house while a really extreme.
Apparently, it was like falling down anyways.
Right. Yeah. So it was slated for
demolition.
Taking down anyway.
A bird that has a 6-foot wingspan, like you should be able to figure out how to prevent it from getting inside your house pretty easily.
Yeah, and turkey vultures aren't really going to be something that's going to snatch Toto away. Right?
No, they can't.
They're after carrion, dead things, right? They're not going for the live stuff. They're birds that eat dead stuff.
And I've seen the same dead possum on Spruce Street for like 2 months, so they're not working too hard.
Black vultures are more of a pest because they're notorious for like ripping like molding and like caulking and like they'll like roost on a roof, and I guess they have some kind of nervous energy, and they can't stop
They're
like
bored. They have a tick.
yeah they can't like stop themselves from like ripping like picking at things. So like they can be a big problem because they'll like rip like a shingle off your roof or so.
I mean, there are lots of birds out there that will do things like that, and every municipality has different laws, and some birds are protected by state law and some are protected by federal law. But I'm fairly confident that turkey vultures you are allowed to harass at some level. I mean, you're not allowed to kill them, but you're allowed to like try and shoo them away in a proper fashion without harming them.
Yeah, it's not like paragons or something like that.
Right.
If I ever had a turkey vulture problem, I would street harass them.
What do you mean?
I would like catcall them until they felt uncomfortable.
Nice neck. Hey.
That you can harass a crow. Crows are really smart, but they can
I feel like
be
they
pests.
could get back at you somehow.
They can, but one of the tricks with crows is that they don't like to see each other dead. So if you were to buy, say, a Halloween crow decoration and hang it like it were dead, then they don't want to see that. And so hanging a crow in effigy would
Gigi's looking very interested in this. all the time.
scare crows away. So you can harass crows in that way. They also don't like really loud noises, so I know a lot of times when crows are roosting, say, in buildings and like farm buildings especially, they'll set off a bunch of firecrackers, which obviously I don't recommend in the city, but it is something that will scare them away.
Why don't we then lead into the first piece we're going to listen to, which is a category of animal that I personally love and would be interested to have show up in my backyard, but not everybody is happy when rattlesnakes move into their house or yard. So we're
Love
going
me
to hear
some rattlesnakes.
And so we're going to hear an interview I did around Christmas, revisiting some of Gigi's family in Phoenix. And turns out there's a guy in Phoenix who I knew, Brian Hughes, who I knew on Facebook kind of thing, who is not just a herper in the community there, but also owns a rattlesnake removal and sort of mitigation company.
Brian Hughes, and I own Rattlesnake Solutions. We do, mitigation regarding native reptiles.
Okay.
Whatever you want to do.
So this little guy, where did he come from?
He's from somebody's garage north of town. So in the winter, most of the calls that we get are somebody digging in, like moving the shed, and then there's 5 diamondbacks under there, or because they're all denning, So the most common thing that we get is right before and after Christmas. We get some people calling because they're taking out Christmas decorations, or I guess it's after Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So things that are related to Christmas. So people go out and get into the garage to get things they haven't touched since last year, and there's a snake behind them. So that's the case here. There were some people that were just, had extra family in town for the holiday, and they were cleaning out the garage, and there he was.
How did they get your number?
From our website. So that's my real job, is I do search engine stuff and websites and marketing.
Oh, okay.
So if you Google anything related to what to do if you see a rattlesnake, then if you live in Phoenix, then I'm the guy.
Hey, podcast listeners. We checked out Brian's snake collection, which includes a whole bunch of rattlesnakes. Now, a lot of people, you might not be familiar with what rattlesnakes actually sound like outside of movies and fake sound effects. So what you're about to hear as we talk is a chorus of rattlesnakes from the cages around us as we talk.
So this is your snake room, as it were. And so, do you have a theme for your collection, or?
Well, I want to. So it's past the point where I was just getting things because I wanted them a long time ago. So they have a use now. So the other side of doing all the stuff that I do with herping and catching snakes here and talking with a lot of people that are here is that I get to meet a lot of people. So I do a lot of education work with them. So I'm trying to get one of every one of the rattlesnakes in Arizona.
So again, I had just forgotten to hit the 8 seconds. This is one that found in a snowbirder's house.
Out in the yard.
Okay.
But I mean, that's where I live. So this one, the only place to let it go would be right into someone else's yard. I mean, there's just nothing else there. So this snake, it's pretty new development. It's possible this was one of the ones that just was in a drainage when they were building the homes.
Yeah.
And it's still there because why not?
Yeah.
I got her as a neonate or a hatchling on a golf course in Mesa,
Okay.
like 10 years ago. So she's
So this is a Sonoran
Yep.
gopher snake. This is a hefty snake. Right? Yeah.
I don't know. They had to get like a bag of these little rubber cobras like this.
Yeah.
And they must have been just running around because we got all these calls coming in
Oh, man.
for there's cobras, and we go and there's like little plastic cobra enough to where we send them a picture and okay, it's the just to make sure. And then there was one lady. It was obviously a plastic, to where like you could see the seam on the tongue and stuff like that, the mold, and she was starting to argue with me about that. Chased her husband and stuff like that. I'm like, all right, you have to talk with your husband. I'm not going to charge you to come out and pick that up. You can see hill monsters if you want.
Ooh. Why? How do I turn that down? Yeah. So are these local Gila monsters, or
these are? One of them was unconscious, swimming or floating in a pool with a bird eating its tail.
God.
And the other one was
What's the one?
here illegally, and I kind of negotiated a surrender
Okay.
with the help of one of my guys.
That's awesome.
And they are sleeping. They probably won't even wake up.
Hey, podcast listeners. At this point, we drove out to release the little rattlesnake that had been found in someone's garage. We kept on talking as we drove, so please excuse the road noise. Thank you.
So this one comes from a group of houses north of town
Okay.
that kind of feeds into this wash system.
Oh, okay.
So where, you have to release them within a mile, but the
Okay.
trick is to just look at what you think that they're using
Yeah.
and make sure that they're either going to be in their home range or at least grouping with other snakes that are in that home range, because if you don't, like if I took this snake and released it on that mountain over there,
Yeah.
this snake could have a different parasite load,
Right,
a different
yeah,
tolerance or
sure.
something. You could wipe out old snakes on that thing.
Right. Yeah.
So it's just not a good thing to do.
Yep.
Even though, and he would probably die too.
That's also probably
Wouldn't know his way around.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like so far like a theme is Western Diamondbacks. Like,
Yeah.
what else are you seeing?
We get speckled rattlesnakes, Mojaves occasionally. We have 6 different species of rattlesnake in Phoenix, but a lot of them, they don't really move around as much. I think the sidewinders are really common where they're at. They move around a lot, but they're kind of protected on the west side where they would come in. They're a lot more specialized. The Diamondbacks just do good wherever they're at.
Okay.
So any of these parks, like just driving around town, any of those mountains,
Yeah, where I've been hiking this whole trip.
just loaded with snakes. And a lot of them don't make it off the mountain, or they ones that tended to leave the mountain get run over by a car a long time ago.
Sure.
So you find, I find anyway, in areas that there are roads segmenting patches of desert, snakes like Mojaves and sidewinders seem to disappear first, just because they wander around more. They're not just tied to a particular feature, where Diamondbacks, just any place that there's shade and food that can figure it out.
And so what do you get called out for most often that's harmless, but people think it's something dangerous?
It's kind of a toss-up between gopher snakes and night snakes.
Okay.
Night snakes, people think that they're a baby rattlesnake.
Okay. How far into, I guess, downtown Phoenix do you get calls from?
Well, we removed a gopher snake out of a high-rise downtown once.
Wow.
But it's not common. We get sometimes, just gopher snakes, city parks, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
We'll get the occasional mystery diamondback that is either a release or a bird, which sounds weird, and you don't realize how often that probably happens, but birds catch snakes, and sometimes they drop the snakes.
Sure.
So there was one that was on a patio in downtown Scottsdale that we think, due to the wounds on it, I think it got picked up by something and then dropped.
Yeah.
So it was like a Saturday night, and it was busy, and people were coming in and stuff, and there's this diamondback on the porch. Places like this whole neighborhood could get diamondbacks in it. It does get diamondbacks in it. We'll go to this.
So we're looking right now at a newish neighborhood with some vacant lots next to it, and like a whole lot of like landscaped, I guess, area in front.
And drainages that go through it that they use to move around.
Do you know much about bite statistics in the Phoenix area? Like, do you hear much about, because you got the Google alert and all that, do you hear about people getting actual venomations?
Yeah, the people get venomated quite a bit. It's it's probably just in relation to the number of snakes that are here. I don't think it's I think Tucson is getting a bit more than others just because there's a lot of retirees there. They
Okay.
kind of start breaking the old standby of that most people get bitten are the ones that are handling them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It ends up not being true in some areas, if at all, because there's in places like that you have a lot of people that are gardening, a lot of people moving in from out of states that don't know that you're not supposed to just reach your hand into the bushes,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So it gets hard to interpret because those same people that get bitten on the hand, so you just have the report of what they were doing at the time.
Yeah, as opposed to this classic drunk boyfriend scenario.
Yeah, I mean that still happens too. That happens
Yeah.
quite a bit. But there's some legitimate bites in there too.
Okay.
Not very often. I mean, it's still. I use this in my education program when people ask, like, try to assess the threat
Yeah.
of what it is a dangerous animal, but what is the threat? And that in Phoenix, where we have there's more rattlesnake, like in the city, there's more rattlesnake species than in most states.
Yeah.
And they're very, very common. That if someone is bitten by a rattlesnake, it still very often makes the front page of the news. It's still,
Okay.
It's not something that, it happens, but I can't recall a death
Okay.
that's happened here. So it's you gotta remember where to turn it. So this whole area is going to be developed eventually. So that's why this dead is getting interesting to me, because I get to watch it through that time. So
Interesting, but a little sad.
It is sad.
All right, so we're releasing the baby. How old do you think that one is?
He's like a yearling. Oh, he's probably older. He's either a skinny 2 or a well-fed 1.
So right now the snake is sitting there on the ground, chilling for a minute, and we're looking around the rocks to see if we see any adults hanging around. Go under. There you go. Okay. Often do you see them that do repeat removals of a snake?
Oh, it's almost never.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was just looking at that by address, like how many times would we visit the same address to catch a similar snake?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm doing scale counts, to make sure it's the same one. It's just not something we see, and a lot of that's because if you remove the snakes, if you have an area that has good habitat for them, you're providing something for them, then you can remove a snake, and then there'll just be another snake. So what we try to do is remove the snake and then remove why it's there.
Yeah.
So, rock pile next to a swimming pool with a dog food bin next to it. Okay, well, you see what your problem is, So we catch the snake and then tell them how to never see, basically clean that up, fix the gate, stuff like that. And if they listen to it, then they can really reduce their chances of seeing a snake.
Okay.
A lot of times it's pretty obvious why the snakes are there. There's one woman that I know that one of my very first calls, she had a rosemary bush and she was laying out rabbits for the baby, or carrots for the baby rabbits. Started going in there, and she was freaking out because there was a little diamondback in the bush eating baby bunnies.
We were listening to this, and the part about removing why the snake was there was kind of resonating. We were also talking about snakes around Philadelphia. Have you been called for brown snakes in yards and that kind of thing?
We really haven't. Snakes
Okay.
have not been an issue. I mean, if they are an issue, people haven't brought it to us.
Good. Okay. I feel a little bit more pride in my fellow Philadelphians because brown snakes are all over the place. Not every single lot in Philadelphia, but backyards, vacant lots, cemeteries, community gardens. And I think people see them and don't freak out, which I think is just nice.
They are so cute that I think it might transcend their, people's fear of snakes because they're like, oh, look at that thing.
Exactly. We're in that respect, Philadelphia is lucky that it doesn't have resident rattlesnakes or copperheads. I personally feel unlucky that my city doesn't have rattlesnakes and copperheads. But if I felt that strongly about it, I could move to Phoenix or anywhere in the desert Southwest, I guess. But we were talking, and I chuckled. I'm looking actually at a bag of baby carrots right now, and I would actually think about leaving them under a bush in the backyard to try to attract rabbits to feed the rattlesnakes. Anyhow, we were talking about other things besides snakes that people perceive as pets as pests, and then in reality aren't. We were talking about house centipedes, which was one of our favorite ones. I think they're really cool. But I've heard more people react really strongly about house centipedes than almost anything else.
They look like a creepy mustache running on your wall.
Quite true.
I have a story where I was taking a bath with Magnolia when she was like 1.5, and a house centipede crawled out of the overflow
Yes.
spot.
Yes.
On the tub and fell in the bathtub.
Yes.
And I was so proud of her because her reaction was to like help the bug and rescue the bug. And so we were able to get it onto the windowsill where it wouldn't drown, and like she was really concerned about it, wanted to touch it. I was like, no, I gotta leave it alone.
Right.
So we sort of like rescued and let this house centipede recover, and I felt very good about our bug tolerance.
You say millipedes is another one.
So yeah, I mean, house centipedes are one thing, and they are actually a good bug in the sense that they're a predator, and so they're eating what might be the bad bugs. So if you kill the predator, you inherit its job. Millipedes are another thing, and actually millipedes really aren't doing anything except for, again, they're helping turn dead things, mostly leaves and things, back into soil. So they're a good bug in a sense too, because they're detritivores. They're helping things decompose. But people freak out, I think, mostly because with house centipedes, they've got all those legs, they're fast, right? Yeah. Millipedes are actually pretty slow, and they, I don't know, they're not quite as foreboding, perhaps, but people still don't like them for various reasons. But again, if you remove the reason that they're there, which with the millipedes, it's oftentimes a pile of leaves or something else that's decomposing and turning into soil, then you're going to eliminate the reason the millipedes were there in the first place. And then you won't have a millipede problem. And with the house centipedes, take a look around and see what other insects are there, deal with that, and the house centipedes will go too.
All right, so we've talked as a theme for a while in the podcast about how animals and plants too that share cities with us do so because there are resources here for them that they use. It isn't like, you don't like clear the land and build a city and then everything finds a home again. They're only there if there's something that we have for them. And our houses are chock full of stuff. I mean, we have wood that the houses are built out of, books that some things might like to eat. I'm looking at a table full of crackers, which I'm sure are leaving crumbs that I'll never be able to sweep up. That'll end up in the floorboards. And
old sweaters.
Grain.
Yeah. Drippy faucets. So moisture in dark, moist spaces and behind your sink. Your blood sometimes. Your pet's blood. And so you're talking about how to isolate your house from all the things that might want to get in here and share all the wonderful things we have inside the house. Right. So some of the things and tips you can try in your own space is while trees are very important, especially in a city, for air quality and shade and just they look nice. Within the city, it is recommended that trees be trimmed back about 6 feet from any structure. Otherwise, you've created a superhighway for anything that's living in or near or on that tree to make it easily into your home, especially if branches are brushing up right against your house.
Like
also,
a squirrel ending up in your attic.
Yeah. A squirrel is a really good example, and that is something which is a pest. And if you've ever had a squirrel in your attic, they cause major destruction. they're very, they gnaw, they trash things. It's like a big squirrel party up there.
Yeah.
So trimming trees branches back about 6 feet from a home is really a good idea. Any structure really. The other recommendation, so some things come up and from the high, from tree branches and whatnot. Other things are down low. And so taking a look around the edges of the house, making sure that there's nothing that has soil or leaves or any of those sorts of things right up against the house. It's recommended that there be about an 18-inch buffer between any kind of soil or leaf material, any organic material, and the foundation of the house. So, whether you can put concrete down or, some gravel down or anything that's going to create a barrier for about 18 inches, and then start the garden, or the lawn, or plant your flowers, whatever it is.
So what happened was that I think it was this winter, we found that something had eaten a hole in the side of a loaf of bread's plastic bag and eaten through a chunk of the loaf. And it's happened before in West Philly, various places I've lived, and so we knew it was mice. And we talked more about food and shelter, and we did remove the food from the counter where it was easily accessible to the mice. But then we set out to kill the mice, which I had mixed feelings about, but still, if there are mice living in my kitchen and I'm working on the other things, I still put out traps, and we can talk about that after this in a second. All right. Okay, so it's December 4th. We've had a late fall, and so now it's starting to get cold. And this morning, when I came downstairs to put together my lunch for work, I found that the piece of bread I pulled out had been eaten away in the corner, and that several other pieces of bread had been also in a hole chewed in the bag of bread on the countertop. So I think we've got some mice, some other synanthropic organisms sharing our food, which we don't allow in this house. So I'm going to set a couple traps. I know it's the morning, it probably won't come out until later, but we're not going to get home until after dark tonight, which, dark coming early in early December. So maybe we'll catch it before we get home from work. I just got a couple snap traps baited with peanut butter. I will be exploiting the love of peanut butter that house mice and I share. There's one trap set. Okay, it is 8:45. We just got home on Friday night, and there are no mice in the traps. Looks like the mice have not taken the bait, and the traps are still sitting there with peanut butter. Okay, it's the morning on the 5th of December, 9 o'clock. Nothing has touched the traps, so...
Quick voice note. This morning, and I was interviewing someone on Skype, and saw a small mouse run across the floor at around 6:50, 7 o'clock in the morning. So the mice are back, or never left, and I missed them, and we'll try to trap them again.
All right, it's the morning of January 16th, and somehow one mousetrap caught 2 young mice at the same time, which I've never seen, after they sort of ate all the peanut butter yesterday and didn't trip the traps. So now I'm going to feed them to the snakes.
Synanthropic organism. Oh, Sam, I have a really effective mousetrap in my house named Lola. And my cat is, I got her because someone who had her before we moved into a house and had 2 other cats, and they would harass her, and she was, she was like over grooming. She had like skin problems, I guess, because she'd losing hair. She was like super skinny and like had like scabs, I guess, from like grooming herself too much and scratching. So I took her in, and she went from looking like a scruffy, like a scraggly squirrel to like a lion. But she's still really little. But
like a little muppet of a cat.
But she was like, and like was really scared of people forever. So like I was like, oh. Just, you imagine that kind of a cat. She liked me, of course. I'm like the one that feeds her, and so she'd hang out with me, but everybody else she'd hide from. So I was supposed to be super meek, but man, she woke me up one morning like doing the mouse song. It's like a meow that you only. It's like a series of meows that like almost sounds like she's singing. She's like meow 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 meow, and has like dropped a mouse in my bed at 4 a.m. and like.
If you want to throw those in the freezer for me, I'll feed them to the snakes.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so she's a super good mouser. But not that I have that much mice. But
and we're not going to make this about feral cats, but really fast, I want to point out this is Tony talking very affectionately about his indoor
Exotic, invasive.
You're talking about mice as actual. There are the things like earwigs, which are more of an aesthetic problem than anything else.
Right.
And then mice are a different category.
Yeah, I mean, mice are a serious health concern, and there are different kinds of mice out there. But the mice that infest homes here in the city are, the house mouse. And house mouse can do a lot of damage to a home, so it is a structural pest. It is estimated that a good chunk of the house fires of unknown causes were probably caused by rodents chewing on wires and walls. So there is that as well. They damage food, they can damage property, but even more importantly, they are one of the biggest triggers of asthma.
Tony and I look at each other. We both have asthma. Yeah.
There is a protein in their urine, which is a very well-known asthma trigger. So homes are obviously places anywhere a mouse has been, it's probably peed, and that urine can persist for quite some time, and that protein also can persist for quite some time. So it is really important to get rid of, to eliminate, to seal up cracks and crevices so that new mice can't move in, and to properly clean up areas where mice have been.
Yeah, and to take those easily chewed through bags of bread off the counter.
Right. So proper food storage is really, really important. And then using traps to trap the ones that remain is, so that then you can have a mouse-free house,
Are cats recommended from mouse
So
control?
we actually don't recommend cats for mice because not all cats are good at it. Sometimes they'll bring you a dead mouse. Who knows where they dragged that mouse along the way? There could be bacteria and other things that get spread, bodily fluids, blood, whatnot. The other thing is some cats are not good at getting mice. We've heard awful stories of people starving their cats, hoping that they'll turn to the mice instead. I'm not going to feed this cat because it's going to go for the mice then, when actually it's just not into the mice. It's not its thing. Yeah. And so that there's cases of animal cruelty, and
maybe
so,
that's left over from the cat apologist propaganda. Let's say a fed cat doesn't hunt.
Right.
Which is not true.
Lola is very well fed.
She can eat whatever she wants, whenever she wants. And she still catches mice.
Right. So some cats are just not interested in it. So we really don't recommend cats. I mean, there are lots of biocontrols, like one thing eating another out in the world, but cats and mice, it's Tom and Jerry.
What a black rat snake.
I would love it if we had black rat. One of my sort of environmental, I don't know what to call it, sort of great problems with the cosmos is why can't black rat snakes live in Philadelphia, where I live? And I think we'll end on maybe a slightly romantic note about mice. I was researching mice, and I had seen an article, and it sort of piqued my interest on this part. And it's something I think on the podcast we talked about with other kinds of critters like house sparrows. That there are animals that were wild once somewhere, but have been with us so long that it's hard to draw a distinction. It's hard to put your finger on where they originated, and that they are not just a wild animal that sometimes hangs out with us. They're permanently in community with us wherever we go. And so house sparrow is one of those, and then mice. And apparently mice originated in Indian subcontinent, and for I think I was reading something like 8,000 years or so, but maybe more recently. But basically, with agriculture moving out of Southwest Asia, moved with agriculture, so thousands and thousands of years ago, through Europe in a couple different directions, through various parts of East Asia, and then with European explorers to the New World, etc. And so mice are sort of very much like a part of our society, and they can do sort of genetic analysis of mice and tell which migration of mice this particular mouse is from. And so you can, if you find let's say a desert island in the Pacific somewhere, you can figure out who visited it when by the genetics of the mice on the island, because you can say, all right, these are the Polynesian or whatever the mice, or no, these are definitely British mice that like rode in on some English ship in the 1800s and they visited for water or something. Yes, they shouldn't be in your house and you should do something about it. But trying to figure out a way to cultivate like a certain amount of like respect and like for like the history and sort of the ecology of something, even as I'm trying to kill it. One of my favorite poems is To a Mouse by a Scottish poet named Robert Burns. So Gigi had been planning on getting one of her acting buddies who's Scottish and lives in Glasgow to read the poem for me with the proper accent and everything. Sure. And so we sort of moved that up for my birthday present to like being for the podcast. So instead of our usual
Wildlife Bling,
we're going to have Lawrence Crawford read To a Mouse by Robert Burns. And you'll hear that after the end of the episode.
Before we finish up, I want to make sure that if there's any more anecdotes or any pieces of information or anything that you wanted to talk about that you didn't get to, I want to make sure we cover that. You know.
Well, I mean, I could go on and on and on for days, weeks, months on pests and pesticides.
We'll have you back.
Health and those sorts of things. I mean, but
also, hey, why don't you? So I'll say this softly because my neighbor might be out there right now, but I have a neighbor who will sit there with a can of like wasp spray or something.
Right.
And like, psst, psst, psst,
right.
You know, and it's sort of their property, okay, but it drives me a little nuts.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit about why you might want to avoid using, you know.
Right. So, I mean, for starters, just because something is for sale doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. There are lots of things that are available where, you know, they're legal, they're approved by the US EPA. However, if questions haven't been asked, and many more questions haven't been asked than have been asked in terms of environmental or human health impact, then we don't know the answers whether or not something is safe. You have to consider what it is. Is there another way to get rid of that pest? So, for example, the neighbor with the wasp spray, you know, why is that wasp there? Well, wasps are actually pollinators. So do you really need to be killing a wasp? Probably not.
I don't
know.
Kill them. Yeah. I mean,
you know, like if someone has an allergic reaction and there's a wasp nest, and you know, there's a lot of factors that can contribute to why someone might want to eliminate them. But big picture, you don't need to kill one wasp at a time with a can of Raid. If you're really that upset about it, you know, like a rolled up newspaper, a fly swatter, you know, is a far more effective and less toxic way to deal with it.
Maybe a rainbow bee eater.
Yeah, there's that
rainbow
too.
bee eater. We should import some. Yeah.
Seems like for talking to wildlife rehabbers in the area, like that's one of the biggest causes of like raptors coming in is rodenticide.
It's a big issue with urban mammal predators that they have those top of the food chain effects of eating a bunch of rodents with rodenticide.
Little bits of this and little bits of that, and then suddenly the big
and they end up with these horrible cases of mange and like weird other stuff that kills them.
Yep.
And so it seems it's a frustrating point of incompatibility. It's like a bobcat. Yeah, okay. We'll take up the question of whether you want mountain lions living in your backyard.
I do.
I do too.
Right,
but
predators are great.
I could understand that people might disagree with that kind of thing.
Right.
But let's say foxes or bobcats or that kind of thing on that scale, like they're not. And I'll even say coyotes. I want coyotes.
I'd go with wolves.
Or here we go. But so at all these scales, these are things that eat rodents at some point and to some degree, and so it can be killed by rodenticide. So even if you think to yourself, I'm never going to eat a mouse myself, you know, like
you say that, and then next thing you know, you're like stationed in the Arctic.
Long story short, it's not just about you and that one pest you have. There's a big world out there, and we're all connected.
All right, so let's wrap up. We'll repeat what we said before. Please share the podcast if you like it by any means possible. Please rate us on your favorite podcasting platform, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, whatever. Email us anything you want at urbanwildlifecast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter at urbwildlifecast. Find us on Facebook. And we really want your
wildlife bling.
So if you are any city, even if it's what is to you a boring thing, like let's say house sparrows, like doing something neat on your porch, or mourning doves, or if it's a different country or different area, then things that you would find very mundane would be fascinating to us.
Long-tailed macaques are urban wildlife, throughout, tropical Asia. Like that's, I've seen it with my own eyes, but I love to hear people give stories, anecdotes about them.
Tony might get to Australia to see some rainbow lorikeets.
Yes, yeah. I'm
Urban
definitely
lorikeets.
I'm definitely going to Australia. Tickets booked.
So you're going to see some urban cockatoos, urban lorikeets.
Yeah.
You're going to come back, I know, with a whole lot of footage, a whole lot of recording that we're going to turn into like 2 or 3 like Tony's Expedition to Australia episodes.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. But anyhow, point being, wherever you are, whether it's interesting bees, interesting butterflies, interesting plants growing in the sidewalk cracks outside your house, record like 30 seconds, let's say 30 seconds to 5 minutes on your smartphone. So send us an email and tweet at us, whatever, and we will find a way to get that file from you and put it on the podcast.
Dear Moose by Rabbie Burns. On turning up in our nest with a plough, November 1785. Wee, sleekit, cowering, timorous beastie. Oh, what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start awa so hasty, wi' bickering brattle. I would be laith to run and chase thee wi' murdering battle. I'm truly sorry man's domination has broken nature's social union, and justifies that ill opinion, which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal. I doubt na whiles bout they may thieve. What then, poor beastie, thou maun live, and aim icker in a thrave, so's a man requite. I'll get a blessing wi' the lave, and ne'er miss it. Thy wee bit housie too in ruin, it's silly wha the winds are strewin', and naething new too big a neighing. O foggage green, and bleak December's winning soon, baith snell and keen. Thou saw the fields lain bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, and cosy here beneath the blast, thou thought to dwell, till crash, the cruel coulter passed out through thy cell. That wee bit heap o' leaves and stibble has cost thee mony a weary nibble. Now thou's turned out for a' thy trouble, but hoose or hald, to thole the winter's sleety dribble, and crae cruach cold. But Moosie, thou art no thy lane, in proving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang aft ugly, and lee as though nought but grieve and pain for promised joy. Still, thou art blessed compared wi' me. The present only toucheth thee, but och, I backward cast mine ee on prospects dear, and forward though I cannot see, I guess an and fear.